Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am Danielle, aka Stitcherista here on YouTube, and today is another Stitch with me while I continue working on Modern Folk Embroideries, Fruits of Plenty. I am using DMC 3750 for the dark blue color and DMC 958 for the green color. And I am stitching this on 28 count Joe Blinn in the color Lamb's Wool, 2/2. And the stand I'm using is my Erica Wilson stand. It is Wilson, right? Because I said friggin' Miller in my other video. Yeah, no, it's Wilson. Okay, so not much to report on the chatty front. Life is going on as normal. So let's just get right into the true crime. This story is called We Can Work It Out. As I take a sip of one of my most favorite Bang energy drinks, the Froze Rosé. It's very good. Okay. Alfna Amin was a thoroughly modern young woman raised into a culture that still embraces archaic rituals and religious beliefs. Alfna's parents, Dev and Kanan Amin, had immigrated to Canada from their native India in the late 1960s, and Alfna had been born and raised there. Her father was a doctor, and the family moved frequently from one small town to another, wherever his work took him. Few of these places had other Indian families, and so Alfna became quite westernized. She was a bright and pretty girl who did well academically and attended the University of Saskatchewan, which I have to die laughing because that's what Bill says for Szechuan Cafe in our area. He calls it Saskatchewan. After high school, eventually graduating with a degree in dentistry. But while Alfna may have adopted Western values and mores, she was unlike her classmates in many ways. She never dated, not in high school and not even at college. Her ambition was to find a husband after she obtained her degree, and she intended going about it in the traditional way. Marriages in Hindu culture are often arranged, with the bride's parents selecting her marital partner and the couple meeting for the first time on their wedding day. Holy shit. Can you imagine? I can't imagine doing that, but okay. Alfna was put under no pressure by her parents to follow this tradition, so I have to give the parents credit for that. She alone made the decision, saying she wanted to be true to her culture. She asked only for the right of refusal should the man her parents chose not be to her liking. Yeah. And so Dev and Kanan set about finding a suitable match for their daughter. They did this by placing an ad in an Indian matrimonial newspaper. Oh my God. And they were soon contacted by a couple who thought their son fit the bill. The young man's name was Varesh Patel, and he was from Buffalo, New York. At 26 years of age, he was 3 years younger than Alfna, but had accomplished already much in his young life. I'm sorry, I have a hangnail that is bugging the piss out of me right now. Currently, he was a surgical resident at Baltimore's Union Hospital. And perhaps even more importantly, Varesh's parents were from the same area as the Amins, the Indian state of Gujarat. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That was what sealed the deal. After an exchange of phone calls, a meeting was set up between the parents. Okay, I had to go get some nail clippers because that was really bugging me. Okay, so they find Varesh. He's a surgical resident. The parents are from the same place as the other parents. It all sounds great, right? So after an exchange of phone calls, a meeting was set up between the parents. Terms were agreed, and Alfna and Varesh were finally allowed to speak directly to one another over the telephone. During their year-long courtship, they would meet on several occasions, although they were never allowed to be alone together. There was always a chaperone present. If Alfna had any misgivings over the arrangement, she did not voice them. In fact, she said she felt an instant connection with Varesh. Okay. So finally, on May 23rd, 1998, the big day arrived. With her petite, slender figure and delicate features, her exquisite crimson sari, and her hands and feet adorned with intricate henna curlicues, Alfna made a stunning bride. Varesh, towering over his intended by nearly a foot, seemed like a good match for her, and everyone agreed they made a stunning couple. The wedding, hosted by the bride's parents in their hometown of Saskatoon, was an opulent 3-day affair attended by 400 guests. Jesus. It was even featured in a CBC documentary on traditional Indian weddings. But almost from the moment that vows were exchanged, there were problems. Oh boy. Alfna may have wanted to reconnect with her roots, but she had no idea just how traditional her husband's parents were. For starters, they barred the young couple from spending their wedding night together. What? The marriage could only be consummated, they said, once the union had been blessed by a priest back in their hometown. Then they refused to attend a breakfast hosted by Alfna's parents and also forbade Alfna from attending. The bride could not return to her parental home until after the marriage had been consummated, they insisted. So where was she supposed to stay? And then finally there was the deal breaker, at least from Alfna's perspective. During their courtship, she and Varesh had talked frequently about what their living arrangements would be after the wedding. It is common in Indian tradition for a newly married couple to live with the groom's family. But how was this to work if the family lived in Buffalo and the groom lived in Baltimore? Alfna quite naturally wanted to be with her husband, and Varesh had agreed that this was how it should be. But it appeared the young man was totally beholden to his father, and when his father insisted that Alfna remain in Buffalo, he quickly backed down. Alfna was forced to live in a cramped room in her in-laws' basement. The 29-year-old dentist was also subjected to a strict curfew and was required to account for her whereabouts whenever such explanation was demanded. She put up with it for 10 months before finally deciding she had had enough. On the morning of March 23rd, 10 months after their wedding, Alfna flew from Buffalo to Baltimore in order to confront her husband over their failing marriage. Alfna was well aware that her mother-in-law was visiting Varesh at the time, but this would not wait. It was time to present Varesh with an ultimatum. Either he agreed they were going to live together as man and wife, or she was going to return to Saskatoon. One thing was certain, she would not be spending another night under her in-laws' roof. That whole situation, I'm not trying to, come down on anyone's custom, but holy God. After arriving in Baltimore, Alfna checked into a Quality Inn and spent the afternoon compiling a list of her grievances against Varesh and his family. That list eventually ran to 39 items, but at the root of it all was the convoluted living arrangements. Yeah. Alfna, with some justification, believed that Varesh had made a promise to her and had reneged on that promise. Her intention, though, was not to derail her marriage. This was clear from the heading she put at the top of her list. Borrowed from the title of a Beatles song, it read, "We Can Work It Out." Varesh, unfortunately, was less than receptive to his wife's laundry list of complaints. Perhaps it was Alfna's timing. She arrived at her husband's apartment late evening, just after he had returned from a long and exhausting shift at the hospital. And while Varesh's mom made up a bed on the sleeper couch in the lounge, Alfna and Varesh retired to the bedroom where Alfna insisted she wanted to talk. Varesh said he was tired and suggested they discuss it in the morning, but Alfna had been spending all day rehearsing her speech, and there was no way she was waiting a moment longer. You know how you feel when you really want to tell somebody something? She launched into a soliloquy, reading from her carefully compiled list, and she may as well have been talking to herself, because Varesh made no response at all, and at one point, he even dozed off. She had to be infuriated by that. Oh my God. When Bill is not paying attention to what I'm saying, it's so irritating. If I really want to make sure he's paying attention, I have him look in my eye. Look in my eyes when I'm talking, right? So just before 3 o'clock on the morning of March 23rd, the Baltimore police received a call from a frantic woman. She said that her name was Chandrika Patel and that her son had been stabbed and was bleeding to death. Officers immediately rushed to the address she gave and were met at the door by a young woman who identified herself as the victim's husband. What? No, it couldn't have been husband. That has to be a misprint. It has to be wife. It should have said wife. She led them into the bedroom where Varesh lay on the floor, attended by his mother, who was pressing a sock to his neck in an effort to staunch the flow of blood. The 26-year-old doctor was rushed to Sinai Hospital and immediately wheeled in for emergency surgery. He didn't make it. Within an hour, he was dead. Taken into a Baltimore police station to answer questions, Alfna told a story which her interrogators found difficult to believe. Speaking in an unemotional drone, she said that she had woken during the night and heard her husband get up and walk towards the kitchen. Then she heard the faucet running and assumed he was pouring a glass of water. She was just about to turn over and go back to sleep when suddenly he pounced on her, straddling her and pinning her to the bed, and that was when she noticed he had a knife in his hand. A violent struggle then ensued, with Alfna screaming as she tried to wrestle the knife from Vanesh's grip. During that skirmish, isn't his name Varesh? There are so many misprints in this story. It's Varesh. During that skirmish, she managed to turn the knife on him, although he still had a grip on the weapon, and Alpha is quoted as saying, "The next thing I knew, there was blood everywhere." It was at this point that Chandrika Patel entered the room. Seeing her son mortally wounded, Chandrika ran for the phone. However, there was no dial tone because the connector had been pulled out of the socket. And so Chandrika ran to a neighbor's apartment and called 911 from there. She then returned to attend to Varesh while Alfna waited for the police to arrive. So to the officers who heard this story, there was plenty that didn't make sense. First, there was the relative size and position of the combatants. Varesh was bigger and heavier than Alfna. He had the upper hand, the weapon, and the element of surprise. How was it, then, that he had been stabbed to death while she had escaped without so much as a scratch? Then there was the condition of the crime scene. After a struggle like the one that Alfna had described, you would have expected the place to be in turmoil, yet it was quite orderly. But for the blood, you would have thought that nothing untoward had happened. And finally, there was Alfna's demeanor. Although I have to say, you can't base anything on someone's demeanor when something like that happens, because everyone processes all of this stuff very differently. So they said for someone who had just killed her husband during a violent struggle, she seemed remarkably calm. She might have been in shock, right? So the police were convinced that Alfna was lying about her husband's death. A far more likely scenario was that Alfna had lost her temper after her husband fell asleep during her carefully rehearsed speech. After months of not having her grievances heard, she had finally cracked, walked to the kitchen, and fetched a knife. She returned with this to the bedroom and had attacked Varesh while he slept. Yeah, that does make more sense. I get it. I sort of understand. Yeah, she just finally had it. So this was how the police saw it, and this was what the prosecution would present at Alfna's murder trial. If they could prove it, Alfna was looking at a possible death sentence. Oh my. Fortunately for Alfna, she had a sympathetic jury at her first hearing. The 11-woman, one-man panel. How did the hell did they do that, right? They split along gender lines to declare her not guilty of first-degree murder. The panel could not, however, reach a majority decision on the lesser charge of second-degree murder. Alfna was going to have to go through it all again, and at the second trial in September of 2000, she was acquitted of murder but found guilty of manslaughter. The sentence of the court was 3 years incarceration, and she only served 13 months before her release in February of 2002. But your life is so very different. Your parents are probably just, I don't know what, and now you have a criminal record that anywhere you go is going to follow you. And anybody you date now you're going to say, oh yeah, I killed my first husband. People be like, what? Right? Yeah, that's awful. It's awful that she felt like she had to go that route to be married. I mean, I understand she wanted to honor her culture, but good night. Like, what? I don't know about that. So remember, look for something positive in each day, folks, even if some days you have to look a little harder. As always, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments section below, and I will answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you so much for watching and subscribing, and I will see you in my next video. Bye, guys.